Hey y'all, it's me Trish. I'm the Witch at the Dismal Swamp. I just did a live video. It was only a few minutes because only a couple people showed up. And I thank you for those of you that showed up. Now my question to y'all is it says it's in private, but I don't know how to put it public, but I'll have to figure it out, y'all. So if I put it public, then y'all can watch it, but whatever. Now, I'm getting ready to read from February 25th of 1692 until whenever, from the Salem Witch Trials book that I've been reading. I think I ended the last video on the 24th, so now I'm going to the 25th. It's on a Thursday in Salem Village. Okay, now, like I said in my live, whether or not I can go make it public or not, I don't know. But anyway, it's going to start getting good, y'all. Okay? All right, so now we're going to go on to Thursday. Mr. and Miss Paris left home to attend Thursday lecture in one of the neighboring towns. This gave Paris an opportunity to speak with other area ministers about his girls' conditions and to invite them to observe the situation. The outing also allowed John and Tituba, free from Paris's vigilante eye, to prepare a witch's cake. While the master and mistress were out, the cake Tituba only proven attempt at magic. It's Tituba's only proven attempt at magic. Okay. Was intended to be an antidote or a maleficia to oppose witchcraft. Okay, so she was making this to oppose witchcraft. Okay. Acting on instructions from neighbor Mary Sibley, Tituba mixed rye meal with a dash of sick girl's urine, patted the mess into a small loaf, and baked it in hot ashes. She and John fed it to the dog, presumably the family dog, and awaited results. Betty and Abigail may have watched this project, well aware of what it was expected to do. If someone sent an evil to pain them, part of that person was in the evil that afflicted them. The sufferers, by tormenting the tormented substance, in this case, their urine, now safely away from their bodies, it is hoped to injure the essence of the evildoer, still lurking within it. So they're thinking that the evildoer is in their pee. So they made the witch cake with their pee. Okay. Baking the cake and letting the dog devour it was an attempt to hurt the responsible witch, who might then reveal herself. But such charms were risky, as Paris and the other ministers had warned, and the one only opened the girl's eyes to the invisible world. If the cause of their discomforts had seemed abstract before, it is now clear that others expected this no longer to be a matter of what ailed them, but who ailed them. When Mr. and Miss Paris returned home from lecture, they knew nothing of the experiment, but found the girls worse off than ever. Now Betty and Abigail reported seeing the forms of actual people who pinched and hit them. The cause of the girls' pain now clearly manifested to them. The same day, two other girls were afflicted. Ann Putnam, daughter of Thomas and Ann Putnam, and Elizabeth Hubbard, niece of Dr. Griggs. Each lived more than a mile in opposite directions from the parsonage. However, Betty's brother and sister, though living in the same household, were not affected. Okay, now we're on February 26th of 1692. It's a Friday in Salem Village. As Betty and Abigail's symptoms flared, the two blamed Tituba for their pain, which had intensified since the woman had made the witch cake charm. Okay. Betty's parents demanded to know the identity of the invisible tormentors, but this only rattled the girls further. They had already overheard whispers, speculations from neighbors and from members of their own alarmed household. I'm wondering, never mind, I'll just keep going. I'm not going to throw my thought into it yet. All right. Let's see. Names of the people none of the adults seemed to respect. People the adults thought likely to wish harm. People it was safe to name. Okay. The girls reported Tituba form pursuing them about the room. No one else could see it. Even strangers, they knew the real Tituba's whereabouts and what she did when she was well out of their sight. Horrified, Mr. and Miss Parris watched as the girls' necks, arms, and backs contorted in ways that seemed not only beyond their abilities, but beyond the power of epilepsy. At times, something seemed to strangle them as they gasped for air. They were indeed as badly afflicted as the Goodwin children. When several Salem gentlemen and neighboring ministers, as invited, visited the Parris' home and observed the girls suffering firsthand, they, like the physician, concluded that the problems were likely preternatural. They feared that the hand of Satan was in them, as Reverend Hale and Beverly observed, but they also knew Satan did not always use witches for dirty work. Rather than suggest witch-finding techniques or legal recourse, they advised Parris to pray and sit still and wait upon the providence of God to see what time might discover. They also questioned Tituba, who admitted making the witch cake, but denied being a witch. The woman who had owned her previously in Barbados, Tituba told them, had been a witch and had taught her methods for discovering and preventing magical harm. But Tituba herself was not a witch. She did not mention Goody Sibley. On February 27 of 1692, it was a Saturday in Salem Village. The problem was spreading beyond the Parris' household, and unknown apparitions had tormented Ann Putnam Jr. since Thursday. Today, between pinches and attempted to make Ann sign a certain book, the specter announced himself as Sarah Good. Anyway, after walking clear across the village from her Uncle Griggs' house on an errand to the family, Elizabeth Hubbard was also bedeviled. On her way home, face into the biting northeast wind, she was certain a wolf stalked her. There were wolves still, through bounties had made them rare. Oh, okay. So in other words, they was hunting them so much it was rare to see a wolf. Okay. She was certain a wolf was stalking her. There were wolves still, though bounties had made them rare. Elizabeth thought Sarah Good had either ordered this creature to pursue and to terrorize her, or else had transformed herself into a wolf for the chase. Elizabeth also reported being harassed by the spirit of Sarah Osborne. Goody Osborne, nearly bedridden, lived in the northern part of the village on her first husband's farm with her considerably younger second husband, who had begun as her bondservant. They seem to have had a son and daughter, but the son of his first marriage ought to have inherited the farm when they came of age. Despite their father's will, they somehow never had. Beyond this whispered scandal, there were rumors hinting that Sarah's second husband beat her. Well, I'd be beating his ass back. Huh. February 28th of 1692, Sunday, Salem Village. The wind and rain intensified all through the night and howled over New England throughout the Sabbath. The weather kept old Governor Bradstreet from attending meetings in Boston and flooded rivers already full of the melted excess from upcountry snows. Westward, the Connecticut River washed away buildings and bridges. Its torrents rampages over 26 feet above normal, drowning cattle and croplands. That's a lot. In Salem Village, Elizabeth Hubbard's troubles continued, caused, she thought, by Sarah Good. The other girls were no better. It likely occurred to someone amid the alarming reality of humanly uncontrollable storms and floods that Satan could control tempests and that witches could whistle up storms. My husband's calling me. And I'm almost done. So I'll have to call him back. February 29th of 1692 is a Monday in Salem town. All four girls were in such a frightening condition over Sabbath that something clearly had to be done. Anne's father, Thomas Putnam, along with his brother, Edward Joseph Hutchinson, and Thomas Preston, a son-in-law of Francis and Rebecca Nurse, traveled the wet, treacherous roads to Salem town. Once there, they swore out official complaints before Magistrate John Hawthorne and Jonathan Corwin to charge Sarah Good, Tituba Indian, and Sarah Osborne with suspicion of witchcraft. Okay, this is where it begins, y'all. Whereby there had been much mischief done. Elizabeth Parris, Abigail Williams, Ann Putnam, and Elizabeth Hubbard. Sundry times within 2 months and lately also done. At Salem Village, contrary to the peace of our sovereign Lord and Lady William and Mary, King and Queen of England, etc. As only one of these four complainants had any of the afflicted in his own household, their accusation represented a neighborhood action against a common danger. The magistrates issued arrest warrants for Tituba and Sarah Osborne and to Constable Joseph Herrick of Ryle Side, and one of Sarah Good to Constable George Locker, in charge of the Strong Waters Brook area. The constables were to take the three women to Ingersoll's Ordinary in Salem Village by 10 o'clock the following day for questioning. Besides being a lieutenant in the militia, a deacon in the church, Nathaniel Ingersoll ran a licensed ordinary in his house, a tavern that served meals as well as drinks. As there were few public buildings in rural areas, such places were often used for government purposes. The watch house, moreover, stood just across the road and could be used as a lock-up. Okay, now, Salem Village doesn't have a date. All right. It says, Tituba, still unconfined, spent the day going about her usual duties at the parsonage. But the devil and his four witches, as she later testified, pestered her while she scrubbed the lean-to chamber. They ordered her to hurt the children again and then came to Boston for further business, or suffer the consequences. Tituba rebelled declaring that she would not take their orders, but would fear God instead. The specters were unimpressed, for Tituba's earlier voluntary compliance bound her to them. Specters flocked around her at prayer time. The man-devil, Goody-Good, with a cat at her side and a bird on her hand, the two as yet unknown women, and a swarm of familiars. Little yellow birds flew about above the family's praying heads, while a yellow dog crouched in the shadows. Red and black cats pawed Tituba, rudely meowing. "Serve us!" A bird with a woman's head fluttered into his sight and turned into Sarah Osborne. So, the bird turned into Sarah Osborne. Okay. Alright, so Mr. and Miss Parris witnessed none of the otherworldly uproar, but Abigail and Betty saw it all, now that their frightened eyes and unimpressionable minds were open to the invisible world. Tituba tried her best to concentrate on Parris's prayers, but the witches distracted her until she heard nothing but what they wanted her to hear. Sarah Good offered her one of her yellow birds, but what they wanted her to hear. No, I already just read that. But offer her one of her yellow birds. Tituba thought the pretty creature might help to cheer the children, but then she noticed how it pecked nourishment from a bloody spot between the witch's fingers. Horrified, Tituba refused the gift. Tituba's spectral conflict continued as Parris petitioned heaven, unaware how brutally the man-devil and his witches bullied Tituba, and blind to the imps that crowded the hall. One creature watched from the hearth. It was a long-nosed, winged, two-legged, 3-foot high, and hairy all over. The man-devil tried bribery. Would Tituba like this imp for a familiar? She would not. Would she like the cats? If she pinched the cats, the girls would feel the pain. Tituba refused again, and the cats clawed her, trying to suckle. When she pushed them away, they nearly knocked her into the fire. Intimidated and terrified, she pinched them after all, and the girls felt the pain. As soon as prayers ended, the impatient witches hauled Tituba to the girls and forced her to pinch them directly. Then rushed her from the house into the cold night. Before she knew it, she was perched on a pole in front of Goodwives Good and Osborne. They were all flying through the air, unable to see where they headed. Soon they landed at Thomas Putnam's house and hurried inside, where neighbors were holding a prayer meeting for Putnam's tormented daughter, Anne. Good and Osborne produced a knife and ordered Tituba to kill the girl. Anne herself saw all this and later confirmed it. Her family and neighbors could not perceive the unfolding crisis, but they could see Anne's terrified reactions. Tituba again refused the order, wrestling for control of the knife, while the witches threatened to slit Tituba's throat or cut her head off. The blade hovered near Anne's neck, but Tituba continued to struggle, and at last the witches fell back. They set off for Boston by themselves, while the man-devil returned Tituba to her parsonage. In a more mundane interpretation. Oh, by goodness. Of the events and evidence, Tituba, already pressed by extra chores that accompany illness in a household, spent part of the day scrubbing the lean-to chamber. However, having endured for years the constricted life of a slave, she was now accused of deliberate and injurious witchcraft by some of the very children she tended and cared for. She lived under the suspicious eyes of neighbors who believed the accusations, and under the authority of owners who were rapidly reaching the same conclusions. Months later, after the trials and imprisonment, Tituba would say that Paris beat her to make her confess and to name her sister witches, and that all her confession stories were due to the physical intimidation. During the evening, Betty and Abigail reported sighting that human-headed bird that earlier turned into Sarah Osborne in her own home, surrounded by neighbors and family. Young Ann Putnam cried out that Tituba and Sarah Osborne were trying to cut off her head with a knife in revenge for refusing to kill herself. Woo! All right, that is the end of February. That's where I'm going to stop, y'all. I'm at 21 minutes. Next one will be March. I don't know what March has got to say, y'all. So when I read it, I'll be reading it for the first time with y'all. All right. I hope y'all are enjoying this. And if you want me to continue, let me know. Hit the like button, y'all. And I think that's it. Y'all have a good day. Y'all be well, be safe. Let me know what y'all think. Toodles, y'all.